Good afternoon. My name is Moses Engwau, as I have been introduced. More and more, people call me Uncle Mo, but I've also been in audiences where I now qualify to be Jaja Mo. So depending on where you are at in life, you can use any one of those. Before I get started, let me thank the board of AVODA for having me this afternoon. I'm sure that they probably could have vetoed otherwise, but I'm very honored that you have me here this afternoon on such an auspicious occasion. Let me also thank the group CEO of AVODA, June, without who I probably would have never visited Japan. Frankly, June has been here a few years, so I shouldn't give him too much credit. Actually, send my love and greetings to Raphael, who, because of who I was able to come to Japan. And I have a few stories from that trip. Let me thank Joshua, the country director of AVODA, for extending the invitation to me. I suspect it is because my name is Moses, and so he couldn't look past that, having taken the reins from. But mostly, we would all be having coffee somewhere, perhaps in small cafes, if we did not have you graduating this afternoon. And I know I understand the work that goes into graduating from a program like AVODA Blue. I know I understand the sacrifices. I know I understand the adjustments that your families have to make. I know and understand the tears that come with having your product market fit rubbished, and all of the things that come with being part of an accelerator. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for staying the course that has led us to this place this afternoon. Let me also say that Pastor Micah, in whose church we stand this afternoon, mentored me through my youthful days. It's interesting that he has invited me maybe 3 or 4 times, but have not been able to be here yet. And this is my first time here. I've driven past once or twice, but I am happy that finally I get to come. As a youngster, I worked with Pastor Micah, Pastor 𝘼𝙧𝙬 𝘼𝙧𝙬𝗫, Food for the Hungry and World Vision for quite a few years, running something we used to call the Vision Conferences. I was just the errands boy. I enjoyed that a lot. They gave me a big Land Cruiser and radio calls. There were no mobile phones, so they gave you radio calls and so on. And you coordinated this. And you didn't have to sit behind a computer. And so you just drove around, and there were no ACs in cars those days. No, you were not even required to wear the seatbelt. You just put your hand out and felt like you had arrived. I see a few family members that have accompanied the graduates. Thank you for letting them be. I remember when we had our daughter 14 years ago, my wife was just starting a postgraduate program. So she spent quite a few evenings away on the weekends. And so I parented quite a bit. The result, though, is that I have an amazing, amazing friendship with that little girl. And that bond was forged in the 2 years that my wife was doing her school. And so there is a positive side, especially if you've been doing the parenting a lot. Bob. I see Mr. Bob Okello. That's how he goes by the way, online. You look for Mr. Bob Okello, you'll find him. He's my employer. I have been running a program for the International Trade Center, and Bob there is my boss. He won't boss me over after November 30th, I think, but Bob, Joshua, and all these people have been very instrumental in the entrepreneurial space. I had hoped to come with some of my family members here today. The challenge is there is a big football game in Nambole. I have youngsters 19 and 18, and my wife works there, and I couldn't compete, so I came alone. So I have no one to introduce from my family, but they sent their greetings. The theme of our celebration day today is building dreams. I have lost a few dreams, and so it was quite a challenging subject for me to walk back inside me and pull out whatever is there. But I hope that I could share some thoughts that might help. It's probably difficult to think about talking about a dream, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech does not pop up in mind. So his most famous speech, or at least the commonest to many people, is the "I have a dream" speech. The challenges were real, but he saw a day when things would be better. He saw a day when a dream deeply rooted in the American dream would be possible for people like him then. And there are quite a few examples of people who have nurtured dreams, many men before Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, the whole chapter 11 of the book of Hebrews summarizes quite a few people who nurtured dreams. Some of them even building those dreams. It's interesting, though, that sometimes as we think about a subject, we think about what it is not. Interestingly, the writer of the chapter and of the book of Hebrews also takes that route. So he starts the chapter by saying, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, and then decides, maybe that's not enough, and decides to add that it's also the evidence of things not seen. And creates a juxtaposition. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It addresses what faith is and what faith is not. And maybe there's a reason for that. For those who are in the consulting world, when they go into signing their contracts, they love to state what is in scope and what is not in scope, just in case the lines are blurred somewhere. The context of the book, really, was that many people who had come to Christ had gone back to the world. And so the writer is exhorting those who had remained and perhaps were considering joining the rest left. He addresses some of the scariest writings, I think, in Scripture, in the book of Hebrews. But you would be hard-pressed to find more heartwarming words than in the book of Hebrews. There's a time I thought that if I had the book of Hebrews alone, it was enough. But we are in church, and so I will not go into that debate. So he addresses the remnant in the church with really stern warnings, and also encourages them a lot. He literally says that you can come to God. The curtain was rent. You can find help. You can find mercy. You can come to him as you are. There's no more need for an intermediary. The question that has remained asked by many because of the writings in that book has been, could you fall away from the grace of God? Could you actually be lost once you have come to Christ? Could you fall away? When you have time, I encourage you to meet with June to have those discussions. But like those Christians that had come to Christ and fallen back, is it possible that in the pursuit of nurturing your dream, you could come to crossroads and think about turning back? Is it possible that you could take a turn that does not nurture that dream? Is it possible that indeed you could get disconnected from the source of your success? Is it possible that you could get so used to success that you neglect remaining attached to the source? Is it possible that the desires of your heart could become questionable? Is it possible that you completely walk away? Moses, having led the people of Israel out of Egypt through the desert, lost patience after so long, just after so long, and then in a moment of anger strikes the rock twice. And according to the scripture, he drew the wrath of God. And God say, that's it. You won't get there. Even you. In my youthful days, with youthful pride perhaps, sometimes when we got to the nerves of my father, my father worked for the East African Community at some point. He lived in Nairobi, and so he spoke a bit of Swahili. And if you got to his nerves, he just says, "Shenzi." Like, this is stupidity. And sometimes he would add, "Shauri yako, you're on your own." I can almost hear God telling Moses, "Shenzi, you endured so much, and then now this is just stubbornness of heart." Allowed him up the mountain, allowed him to see, but he didn't get. Enter Joshua. In one of his very first battles, Joshua heard from the Lord at every point. It's interesting actually in that chapter though, and Joshua and Caleb were just two of those who survived the Passover generation, so to speak. But while that chapter lists all the men by their names as it lists their faith and acts of faith, by faith Abraham, by faith Joseph, by faith, when it gets to Joshua's portion in the verse 30 of chapter 7, I believe, it says, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell, and neglects to mention Joshua by name. And then goes on and continues to mention the subsequent people by name, including Rahab the harlot. And the writer says, time would fail me to speak about the others, and still has time to name the others. but didn't have time to name Joshua. We're told in that story that when Joshua sent his scouts to a small town called Ai, they came back and told him that it's just a small town, only 2,000 men will deal with it. And so Joshua, in his wisdom, quickly organized 2,000 men, and they got a thorough beating. The inhabitants of Ai routed Joshua's men like a problem. And so, now he goes back to inquire, because see, what had happened is Joshua was so used to the success of marching around the walls of Jericho and seeing them tumble down and just burning that whole city down. And if that could happen, how about this Ai now? I think I got this. I really don't have to inquire of the Lord. I don't have to check in with God for strategies for small matters like Ai. I could lean on my own strength, my own strategies, my own abilities. I remembered a poem I read a few years ago, and I looked it up. It's written by an African-American man called Langston Hughes. All of these guys, did their craft in Harlem, a suburb in New York, originally started by the Dutch, but when more Africans were coming from the south northwards, they ended up in Harlem and became a place that many Africans lived and did their thing. And so he's talking about Lenox Avenue. And in this particular portion is his montage of a dream deferred. And he writes, Lenox Avenue, where dreams are born, amid the dusk and the break of morn. The rhythms rise, the voices call, building dreams beyond the wall. The streets hum loud with untold tales of hands that crafted, of hearts that failed, but even in failure, a spark takes flight, turning the darkness into light. Dreams deferred but never destroyed, built on courage, never void. Each brick laid with a vision clear, a future imagined ever near. Like Harlem's murals, bold and true, your dreams are canvases waiting for you, colors of hope, shades of strife, brush strokes that shape the art of life. But then he goes on to ask the question, what happens when a dream is deferred? Does it fade away and hard? Or does it simmer? Does it grow? waiting for the chance to show. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and the run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like syrupy sweet? Maybe like a heavy load, or does it explode? And so I wanted to just check in with you, our graduating class. That like you have gone through all these beautiful classes, created a plan to go to the market for your product, checked with the market if your product fits, created an operations plan, created a finance plan, created a plan that collects your money and pays out. But you have brought all these miniature business systems together to craft your business plan. As you go out, be sure that you do not defer your dreams. Be sure to revisit your business plan and action it. Be sure that after this victory, after so much money you paid, after so much time you gave up, after so much sacrifices from your family, be sure that you don't defer the dream. Be sure to check in with the Lord, to stay connected to the Lord for small plans and big plans. Actually, if you read further on that story, Joshua makes a second mistake early in his leadership journey. He enters into a covenant, a crafty covenant, with guys who came pretending to be from a faraway land, from Gibeon, and say, and they had the name of the Lord on their lips, and they lied to him. And Joshua again didn't go back to the Lord, and he goes into a covenant with, how else can I say it, with the enemy. Really, he enters a covenant with the devil. Because he didn't check in again. That's the challenge. Sometimes that's the challenge of early success, that you become complacent. Be sure that your dreams are not deferred and that you do not become complacent on your dreams. As I conclude this afternoon, I want to tell you a personal story that, so I mentioned earlier on that I worked for Food for the Hungry. I was in the accounting department, and I worked on a USAID project. They paid us well. They gave us big cars to drive around. In those days, you know, you always know those kind of projects and jobs end. So the buzzword was merry-go-rounds in the office. You save money together, you do something, then the next time it is somebody else. And so I also, when it was my time, I took the money. I went and started a beauty center in Chireka then. And I stopped by about 9 p.m. on my way home. Stayed in the car and honked. The guy came said, did you make any money today? Yeah, we made some money. We are saving for rent. We're saving for this, yes. And I would smile sheepishly, like. That was my idea of doing business. One day, I got a call from the landlord and said, you need to stop by. Maybe 3-6 months later. And when I stopped by in the morning, the whole place was open. I had been robbed, and the landlord's house had been vandalized. See, I was a man who did not mind my business. I had hoped that the business would take care of itself. And so I was in debt. I still owed the merry-go-round money. I owed the land as a land. The landlord hadn't been paid for 3 months. And now he wanted me to fix his building again. I had a son coming. I was in a bad place. What you have got is, you have got the skills necessary to run a business. That is what I lacked. And so you can avoid such pitfalls because of the skills you have got. That morning, the lady who used to clean was sitting on that same floor she often cleaned, and she was crying. Her name was Sarah. And she said, after I have signed agreements with the landlord, Sarah says, now what happens to me? You see, she was earning 3,000 shillings a day. The 1,000 fed her and her 2 children. The 1,000 paid their school fees, and the 1,000 she saved. When I told my wife that story that evening, she invited Sarah. We were expecting a baby, so invited Sarah to take care of the other chores around home as our help now would focus on the child. Sarah went on to work with us for another 8-9 years. And her daughters later on got employed by my wife, where she works as well. I'm telling this story to help you understand that one job you create, that second job you create, that third job you create makes a whole difference to a whole family. The children she educated by saving that 1,000 later worked in the organization that both girls, in the organization that my wife works at. She's still working there somehow. I tell her that they don't make that model anymore. When I met her, she was working there. It's 22 years, 23 years later, she's still working there. So I want to encourage you that as you build your business, as you nurture your dream, as you bring all the parts together, as you create that one job, that second job, that third job, that is the impact that trainings like this would love to see. That is the impact that touches the heart of God. That is the impact that you bring to your community and to your workplace. And I want to thank all those who facilitated the program at AVODA and prepared you for this work and worship in the marketplace, for all their effort. I conclude by saying, stay attached to the vine, to the true vine, to the true source of power. I'll read my last poem of the evening as we conclude by James Weldon Johnson. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place where we stand at last, where the gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou hast brought us thus far on the way. Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee, shadowed beneath Thy hands. Blessings as you go out into the marketplace. Thank you very much.